Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Keizersgrachtkerk. This is the first time we've ever been here, and now that we're here, I think, why haven't we been here for all these years? Gerda, Henk-Jan, thank you for the warm welcome, and we're delighted to be in this extraordinary venue. Welcome to the John Adams Institute. My name is Tracy Metz. You see in front of you a happy director. In the first place, because we are so glad to host a literary evening again. During the Trump presidency, politics were so overbearing that they sucked all the oxygen out of the room. I wouldn't dare say that American politics have calmed down yet, but fortunately now there is more space in our minds, in our heads, in our calendars for other things, for food for the mind and food for the soul. And in the second place, because we have with us this evening author Lauren Groff as our guest of honor. Welcome, Lauren. She's here to talk about her book, Matrix, a novel set in the early Middle Ages on the borderlands between myth and history, a dreamlike fictional biography of the poet and mystic Marie de France. We also have with us this evening Lucy Schaap. She's the translator of Matrix. Lucy, where are you? Stand up. Lucy Schaap. The translator of Lauren Groff's book, Florida, Maaike Beinsdorp, sadly passed away last year, but certainly this evening she's here in our thoughts. In addition to Lauren Groff's talk and her conversation with our moderator, Els Klagebuur, glad to have you back, Els, we have another special event in this evening's program. Annette Kruisbrink and Franka van Essen of Lies, a guitar and vocal duo who set the poems of Marie de France to music. They will introduce their own part of the program, but I think it's also nice to know now already that all the music was composed by Annette herself. Bravo. Also, a warm word of thanks to the International Writers Collective, especially Sarah Carragher and Karen Cow, for whom Lauren is giving a masterclass day after tomorrow. The IWC was instrumental in making Lauren's visit possible, and we are grateful. And just one last word of thanks before we actually get to the program we came to hear. I think the Keizersgrachtkerk really went the extra mile to facilitate this event. They went to the antique store around the corner, Hardy de Jong Antique, and borrowed 2 chairs, especially for us. We really appreciate that too. Thanks for your trouble. Well, I will come back to you at the end of the evening with some closing remarks, and for now, I would like to ask our moderator, Els Klagebuur, to come to the stage. And her introduction will be on our website very soon so that you can reread it at your leisure. Els.
Good evening, everybody. Oh. The first time I saw Lauren's name, I was in an airport bookstore in New York. I was quite terrified of flying back then, and what helped me through a flight was reading short stories. Novels were too difficult to concentrate on at 10,000 feet. I needed something short and sweet, better yet, bittersweet, or hair-raising scary, or very funny. What? Oh, slow down. Okay, slow down. I picked up Florida, Lauren's 2018 short story collection, as most of you will know. Intriguing title. Leopard with half his face shown on the cover, like that. Read the title of the first story, Ghosts and Empties. Right up my alley emotion-wise, stuck in that airport terminal. And then I read the first lines, which are these. I have somehow become a woman who yells, And because I do not want to be a woman who yells, whose little children walk around with frozen, watchful faces, I have taken to lacing on my running shoes after dinner and going out into the twilight streets for a walk, leaving the undressing and sluicing and reading and singing and tucking in of the boys to my husband, a man who does not yell. Okay, I thought, I'm totally getting this book. I got on the plane, downed a mini bottle of wine, also helps a little, started reading Florida, and finished it when we touched down in Amsterdam. Just like what happened to me with Stephen King, when I got my hands on a copy of Misery when I was 14, I was dead set on reading everything Lauren had written. First, I Googled her, of course, as one does, and found out, not so hard, it's on top of every Google search, that Barack Obama named her novel Fates and Furies as the best book he had read in 2015. That's basically the coolest thing that can happen to you as a writer of literature. Besides maybe, just maybe, winning the Nobel Prize. And as far as I'm concerned, getting a compliment from Stephen King, which Lauren also got. And this for her debut novel, The Monsters of Templeton, a story about a young woman who, in the wake of a disastrous affair with her archaeology professor, returned pregnant and miserable to her ancestral home in Templeton, where at the same day, the 50-foot corpse of a monster surfaced in the local lake. Stephen King wrote, "I was sorry to see this rich and wonderful novel come to an end, and there is no higher success than that." I couldn't agree with him more, except that by ending it, I could move on to her next book, Arcadia, and another short story collection, Delicate Edible Birds. And then came Fates and Furies, in my opinion, the most thoughts and feelings-provoking novel about a marriage since Revolutionary Road. A really powerful novel, President Obama jubilated from the Oval Office. Very true. But I would like to add powerful, but not in the punch that big red bag in the gym with sweaty boxing gloves kind of way. I think it is powerful in the sense that it makes you glad that you are alive and able to read this wonderful, beautiful work of art, which gives meaning, joy, and a getaway from whatever you don't feel like doing. And it gives you angles to look at things, whether it is the swamps of Florida or a hippie community in the 60s, from unexpected perspectives. And then I waited until The Matrix came out, a fictional biography of poet and mystic Marie de France, the last child in a long line of female warriors in a noble French family. Set in the early Middle Ages, Mary is cast out of the English court by Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine and is ordered by the Queen to take charge of an impoverished community of nuns on the brink of starvation. I read the book in a hammock in France during the days of an overwhelming heat wave. It gave me a deep sense of emotional involvement with women, nuns in particular, and it gave me chills in the best possible way. And not just by reading the parts that describe so well how terribly cold and clammy it was in the Abbey, which Mary, who in the beginning very reluctantly takes on the task that has been pushed on her, turns it into a fortress of female power. As in all her books, the use of language as well as the storylines are astonishing while they make complete sense all the time. As Mr. King would say, there is no higher success than that. So, let's now listen to Lauren's words in her own voice as she reads from The Matrix.
So happy to be here. I'm actually just going to stand here because up here it'll feel like I'm giving I don't know, I'm preaching, and you're my congregation, and you're not my congregation. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. It's a cold and misty night, and you could be taking a bath instead, so this is awesome. Lucy, it's so good to see you here. She's my voice in Dutch. And the thing, translators are the most amazing humans. What they do is they take a book and they rewrite it in their own way, and they're often much better than the original, I'm sure. And de BGB, I said it so wrong, but they're here too. How do you say it? It's my publishing house. De BGB. Is that right? I feel like I can speak Dutch when I'm here because it's like medieval English in some ways, right? It's a little bit like that. And my family's here. Hi, guys. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be in Amsterdam, one of my favorite cities on the planet, and you are so lucky to be here and far away from the massive amount of turmoil that's happening in the United States at the moment. So I'm going to just give you a brief description of how I came to be writing this book, Matrix, which is a little bit eccentric, right? A story about 12th century nuns. And then I'll give a little reading of the book itself. So, 2019, we were deep into the Trump years, right? It was awful. I'm sorry if you have different political opinions. But I felt awful every single day. You would open the newspaper, open the New York Times, and just get another tsunami of darkness and dread just crashing over you. And as a writer, I mean, I tried to not read the New York Times until lunchtime, but sometimes the dread made me open it earlier, and then I couldn't write for the rest of the day. It was hard. So I was at this incredible institute at Harvard. It's the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Studies. It's this wild, wonderful coming of minds. All you do is you give one lecture, but you're there with people from all over the academic world, right? So I was there with chemists, I was there with historians, actual historians, I was there with people, physicists. Like, I am so obsessed with black holes right now because of these people. I've read like probably 10 books about black holes at this moment. So I was being filled with knowledge and understanding from different fields, and I didn't really know what to do with all of this joy. And I was also writing another book which will come out in the US and the UK, and maybe here, in the fall. And I love that book, but I was in the audience one day, and my friend Dr. Katie Bookish, who's a medieval scholar, she teaches at Notre Dame University, gets up. And I don't know if you've ever met Katie, but she is like the most radiant, saint-like person. You can actually envision her in a wimple. And at the moment, she was also 8 months pregnant, which is complicated, right? Like with my vision of who this person is. And she started giving this talk about medieval nuns that actually made me start to shake, right? I was shaking out of excitement and joy because she was talking about the liturgies of medieval nuns and how when Katie goes to the actual papers, she's able to find the ways that the nuns have actually been subversive a little bit. And it was so thrilling to me. And I was sitting, in the audience, and I was listening, and I started getting this sort of weird feeling. And then I remembered Marie de France. So in college, I was a big-time nerd, and I translated medieval French for a full year. It was one of those things that I thought I was going to be a medievalist, and then I realized, I'm not very good at it. But I loved it, and I loved particularly Marie de France. So for those of you who don't know, she was the first published female poet in the French language that we know. She wrote in the vernacular first as a female poet, and we don't know anything about this woman. We know two things, actually. We know her name is Marie, and she was from France. And she was probably writing in England. But other than that, there's just a lot of supposition. She could have been an abbess. She could have been one of the daughters of Eleanor of Aquitaine from her first marriage to Louis, the French king. So I was sitting in the audience and I was listening to this person, and then there was a collision. It was like nuclear, I get this wrong every time, fission or fusion, whichever one. I'm not a scientist. And I saw this book. I had this secular vision of Matrix sort of rise up in front of me. And it was so urgent that I actually had to not write the book that I was writing and start to write Matrix. It's kind of a wild book, and it came out of its time because I knew from the beginning this is going to be a book that has no men in it at all. Even the animals are female in this book. Even Jesus is not actually kind of a man. He's sort of like seen from the corner of the eye. And one of the reasons why I did this is because when I was doing a lot of the research, and I've read many books in my life, but I've read deeply into sort of the history of at least European and American literature. And for a long time, until women were given sort of the education and the ability to write, women in these books have been sort of shadow-like figures, sort of pulsating along the walls, not really becoming actual figures in and of themselves. And so I thought, wouldn't it be fun to write a book where men are shadow-like figures pulsing along the walls, right? Also, I've got a husband and 2 boys, and I just wanted to get away from men. I love them, but come on. So I wrote this book, and I'm about to read to you from the beginning of it, and then I'll come and vamp a little bit more, maybe. All right. So I thought I'd just read from the very beginning, just because it's here, and I want to make sure that I finish on time, so. She rides out of the forest alone, 17 years old, in the cold March drizzle, Marie, who comes from France. It is 11:58, and the world bears the weariness of late Lent. Soon it will be Easter, which arrives early this year. In the fields, the seeds uncurl in the dark, cold soil, ready to punch into the freer air. She sees for the first time the abbey, pale and aloof on a rise in this damp valley, the clouds drawn up from the ocean and wrung against the hills in constant rainfall. Most of the year, this place is emerald and sapphire, bursting under dampness, thick with sheep and chaffinches and newts, delicate mushrooms poking from the rich soil, but now in late winter, all is gray and full of shadows. Her old warhorse glumly plods along, and a merlin shivers in its wicker mew on the box mounted behind her. The wind hushes, the trees cease stirring. Marie feels that the whole countryside is watching her move through it. She is tall, a giantess of a maiden, and her elbows and knees stick out ungainly. The fine rain gathers until it runs in rivulets down her sealskin cloak and darkens her green headcloths to black. Her stark, angevin face holds no beauty, only canniness and passion yet unchecked. It is wet with rain, not tears. She has yet to cry for having been thrown to the dogs. 2 days earlier, Queen Eleanor had appeared in the doorway of Marie's chamber, all bosom and golden hair and sable fur lining the blue robe, and jewels dripping from ears and wrists, and shining chaplet and perfume strong enough to knock a soul to the ground. Her intention was always to disarm by stunning. Her ladies stood behind her, hiding their smiles. Among these traitors was Marie's own half-sister, a bastardess sibling of the crown just like Marie, the sum of errant paternal lusts. But this simpering creature, having understood the uses of popularity in the court, had blanched and run from Marie's attempts to befriend her. She would one day become a princess of the Welsh. Marie curtsied clumsily, and Eleanor glided into the room, her nostrils twitching. The queen said that she had news. Oh, what delightful news. What relief she has just now received the papal dispensation. The poor horse has exploded its heart. It had galloped so fast to bring it here this morning. that due to her, the Queen's own efforts over these months, this poor illegitimate Marie from nowhere in Le Mans had at last been made prioress of a royal abbey. Wasn't that wonderful? Now at last they knew what to do with this odd half-sister to the crown. Now they had a use for Marie at last. The Queen's heavily lined eyes rested upon Marie for a moment, then moved to the high window that overlooked the gardens, where the shutters were thrust open so Marie could stand on her toes and watch people walking outside. When Marie's mouth could move, she said thickly that she was grateful to the Queen for the radiance of her attention, but oh no, she could not be a nun. She was unworthy, and besides she had no godly vocation whatsoever in any way at all. And it was true. The religion she was raised in had always seemed vaguely foolish to her, if rich with mystery and ceremony. For why should babies be born into sin? Why should she pray to invisible forces? Why would God be a trinity? Why should she, who felt her greatness hot in her blood, be considered lesser because the first woman was molded from a rib and ate a fruit, and thus lost lazy Eden? It was senseless. Her faith had twisted very early in her childhood. It would slowly grow ever more bent into its geometry until it was its own angular, majestic thing. But at 17, in the spare chamber at the court in Westminster, she could be no equal to the elegant and story-loving Queen who, though small in body, absorbed all light, all thought from Marie's head, all breath from her lungs. Okay, that's it. Ian, is that good, or should I keep going? That's great. All right, there you are. Hi. All right. Yay. Are we going to hear the music?
Yes.
Oh, this is so exciting. I have been so excited about this for months. Oh, good.
So maybe it's nice, well I'm not mine, but I think you can hear me. Maybe it's nice to just explain a little bit about the piece, although I didn't write one single note, she did.
Oh, thank you so much.
And it asked me to speak, since my voice is maybe a bit loud. Annette wrote this piece, 12 songs with a prologue and thank you, that one. And originally they are all texts from Marie de France, which Annette translated into English and in Dutch, and also made it a bit shorter, because the verses of Marie de France are, of course, quite extended. And so it turned out in 12 songs. Actually, they're quite, how should I say that? They're quite dramatic. For a nun, I mean, there is murder in there, there's unfaithfulness in there, and all these kinds of human things. And every song is like a mini opera. And we are actually today playing three and a half of them for you, because as you can see, we are just with the two of us, and normally for the whole piece we have also a cello and a flute with us. But for today, three and a half songs, the prologue, and 3 songs, and you do have the lyrics, so you can read along if you. Dreamlike. waits for the king's own message, though. Tristram is then invited at the event. He plays the harp, a name with a happy end. Every day could be Valentine's Day, if only the husband were out of the way. The lovers plot an evil plan. They murder the poor and innocent man. With boiled hot water, the tub is filled, meant for the magistrate to be killed. Aye, it's like a tongue slips and before her eyes falls right into the tub. The furious husband keeps his wife's hand firmly underwater until she's dead. Thus Eketon ends his noble life, and so does the magistrate's wife.
That was incredible for about 15 reasons. The guitar playing, the singing, the translation was amazing. That was amazing. Well done. Thank you. There are CDs, I think, somewhere. Clay, buy one for me.
All right.
All right.
So, Lauren, when I told my American writer friend Mike Harfke, do you remember him?
Yeah.
That I was doing this interview with you, he told me that several years ago he was in a writers in residence with you. somewhere along the East Coast.
Yeah, I think McDowell.
Yeah, oh yeah, and it's in your Fast and Furious book, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So he told me that one morning you came to the breakfast table and told him or several other people that were there that you just ripped up 40 pages of your work.
Oh, yeah.
And he was quite impressed by that. I think he hadn't written 40 pages yet while he was there. So was this the Matrix?
Oh, I have no idea. No, I mean, I don't rip things up, but I do throw them out. Or I throw them into a box.
Because you write by hand.
I write longhand, and I write longhand because otherwise my OCD sets in, and I will fix the same sentence for 4 months and never move on from that sentence. Yeah.
If you use a computer.
If I use a computer, and I can't read my own handwriting, so it really makes you just like push on really, really intensely into the text if you just write longhand and can't read what you've done.
So what do you do with it then if you can't read it?
So I write drafts. We're getting right into the process. I love it. I write really fast drafts at the beginning and much slower drafts at the end. So I'll write an entire novel, but of course, like in the first draft, the characters change names. Nothing makes sense. There's no real plot, right? I'm really just kind of discovering what it is that I want to write about and who the characters are and a little bit about sort of the architecture of the book at hand. Then I'll put it aside and start over again. And I do this until the book starts to take shape for me. It's I liken it to a 3D printer, which level after level is built onto a thing, and finally you have a three-dimensional object that you can sort of spin in the air. And then when I can finally spin it in the air, that's when I sit down and I play with the language because I love the language. I mean, that's my favorite part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can tell, yeah. And so this putting aside, is that what Mike was describing as ripping up?
Yeah, I think I probably wrote a short story that wasn't satisfactory to me, and so I just put it to the side. And with short stories, it's a little different because I wait until it's urgent, and then I'll try to write it in one sitting, and sort of like surfing energy into shore. And then usually it's not good, so I put it to the side, and I let it sort of sit back in the compost heap back here for a while until it becomes urgent again, and it falls down in front of me, and I have to write it again. So that's usually what I do. I don't rip it up, but I don't use the pages that I've written.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't hurt.
No, it's
no, because you are. It's part of the process.
No, I've been a writer for long enough now that if it were to hurt me, I'd probably be dead by 1,000 cuts. Right? I mean, so I seek joy now, and if things are not giving me joy, then I don't do them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you know that you have to put it aside?
Oh, it just I think that's the hardest thing, I think, for a developing writer, and it took me, I think, 8 years to get to the point where I could see my work in a way that I either knew I could make it something, or I had to wait until I was older, smarter, better able to function in this form, whatever the form was. So it's an internal bell.
Yeah.
And if that bell rings, you have something good. And if that bell is obstinately silent, then you have something not so good yet, and maybe it has potential, so you just throw it back there. Just throw it away, behind you.
Yeah. So that's also, you need to have some self-knowledge as a writer and as who you are as a person.
Yeah, no, I mean, I also think that the first few drafts, too, are about sort of discovering what the platonic ideal of this project is, right? And sort of sussing out, feeling in the dark, whether or not you are able to bring the work to the platonic ideal as close as possible as you can, right? Because nothing is ever there, right? Nothing ever gets there. Not anything I've ever written has ever gotten there. I'm sure other people feel differently, which is great for them. I think there's eventually a time when you just know that there's life in this thing or there's no life in this thing. Not yet. And you wait for the life.
Yeah. So you have often described the way a book arises as like a number of ideas crashing into each other.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And can you explain how this crashing came about in the growth of the Matrix? How all these ideas then came that?
Yeah, I mean, part of it was what I was saying before about sort of the Trumpism and being at Harvard and hearing all these people and having my friend Katie and then having my long ago love of Moderator come into and my I had actually, at one point, I wrote a whole novel about Moderator before this, about 6 years previous to that, and then it was so bad that...
Really?
Yeah, I just sort of threw it out.
That must have hurt a little bit.
Oh, no, it doesn't hurt. It's fine. It's what I do. Yeah, and then, I mean, there were other things, too, that I really urgently wanted to talk about, but also, you know, I had to get over... I have this weird... I think maybe snobbishness toward historical fiction, which is funny because I actually work in the genre of historical fiction quite a lot. But I think, particularly in the American literary landscape, it's not necessarily seen as fully legitimate, not like autofiction.
Why not?
Like, you know, I mean, yeah, right? And I think it's because there are multiple reasons. One is because there is this pervasive feeling that art should be describing its contemporary world. There's a feeling that historical fiction is maybe a little bit conservative because it's backward looking, right? It looks backward into time instead of sort of fully engaging with the urgencies of the moment, right? But, and there's also just true snobbery. I mean, there are these strange, I guess, class issues in fiction writing in particular, at least in the U.S.
In the U.S., yeah.
And it's descendant from people like Henry James, whom I love very much. I love his work very much. But he has this funny letter, not funny, horrible letter to Sarah Orne Jewett, who's this great, great writer of his time. She wrote a book called The Country of Pointed Firs. And in this letter, he tells her that, well, you know, historical fiction is bound to fail because nobody can actually do it. Nobody can actually inhabit the world at the time. So there's a snobbishness, right? So I actually had to wrestle with these things.
This also has to do with America being such a young country, do you think?
It's possible. I mean, it's possible, right? But I don't know if that's the case. I think there's a lot of anxiety about sort of the status of fiction in sort of the pantheon of art. Maybe there's a feeling that it's not necessarily legitimate anyway, right? And Henry James was very much a snob. And snobbishness comes out of insecurity, right? I mean, just in a period. So I think it's possible that all of these things came together, but then I realized in the course of writing the book that, wait a second, actually, what I could do is it's sort of a petri dish matrix, right? It's sort of my experimental microcosm, where I can talk about urgencies of the moment, right? I can actually look at what's happening today and now, but I have this separate space to do it in, a separate space that's all female, right?
Yeah.
Earmuffs, boys. But when Trump was elected, all my friends and I were crying, and we were like, well, maybe now's the time that we buy our islands and make like a lesbian separatist utopia, you know? And that would have been great.
Yeah.
But instead I wrote it into a book. Yeah,
but it's gonna ask, because some parts of the book seem really to be a reflection on current problems and political situation in dire straits. For example, in the way you write about the natural world. Sometimes I thought these are references to the heating planet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that in particular comes from a feeling that I have of just extreme urgency and dread, and I do wonder, as artists, what are we doing if we're not engaging with the largest threat to humankind ever that's sort of coming up rapidly, like an actual tsunami that's going to crash on us? If we're not sort of engaging with that, what are we doing? So in some ways, I was looking at this book as a way of trying to figure out how particularly the Catholic Church has been complicit in bringing us to the point where we are now. The Catholic Church and its feelings of domination as opposed to dominion, right? So in Genesis, in the beginning, God gives Adam and Eve dominion over the creatures of the earth and of the sky and of the waters, right? And dominion is different from dominance, from domination. And this is my theory, but I think that we have misread so profoundly dominion and domination, and we've sort of read it as domination, and so this is how we have come to the Anthropocene, to really horrendous and irrevocable harm to the planet.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you take, for example, this sentence, this is a deep and human truth that most souls upon the earth are not at ease unless they find themselves safe in the hands of a force far greater than themselves.
Yeah.
Right? This is not nature anymore. I mean, it made me think of, I couldn't help think of figures like Donald Trump when I read this.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's sort of the Trumpian buffoonery and the sort of the hyper-masculine.
And the people who believe in,
Yes, yeah. But also, in some ways, too, that particular line was poking at fiction itself, right?
Yeah.
I'm always poking a little bit at fiction itself, too, because what is a writer but like this artificial god of her own literature, right? And so maybe I'm trying to undermine my own position in the book a little bit.
And also maybe, is it also by writing this historical novel that is also poking at the art of fiction, right? And and about this, apparently this opinion of that it's like a genre which you should be maybe refrain from.
Well, I mean, that was definitely the impression that I got from some people to whom I gave the book in the beginning. It's partially that too, but it's also I was hungry to envision an alternate world, and an alternate world that has some irony in it, the way that our world is as well. And the real Marie de France is only known through two, maybe possibly more works of hers, though, scholars fight about this. But one is the Lay, from which, we heard these amazing songs compressed and sort of made really poignant. But the other one is the Fables. And in my book, my Marie follows in the footsteps of Hildegard von Bingen, who's one of my favorite humans from history, period. And she gets these visions from God.
Yeah.
And she takes these visions from God, and she thinks these are going to change the world, right? These are going to change the course of the church. But as we know, no spoilers, but they don't. Right? And there is no, the Catholic Church in which women are equal to men. And every time in history that has started to happen, it's been squelched all over the planet. So there is irony in that she's known for these things that she sort of tossed off in order to get back to the court, and when she was sitting at her abbess's deathbed, right? And not for the things she thought she was going to change the world with.
Yeah, so that's where the irony...
Like poking.
Yeah. But it still is, even though you said she didn't accomplish what she wanted to accomplish, it's still an unbelievable female leadership story.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, but it's not a hagiography, right? So it's not the life of a saint. It is, I did want to think about female power. And I grew up with a very beautiful, wonderful father whom I love very much. But he would always say, sort of, if women ruled the world, there would be no war, right? Everything would be much, much better. And I love that about him because that was how his feminism sort of manifested. But it also, now 44 years later, I can see that is romantic in a way that takes away the real humanity of women, because we are complicated and hungry and ambitious and difficult as men, right? We are as tough and strange as men. And there have been female leaders who are bad, right? There are a lot of very bad female leaders. So I was thinking about our romantic idea of female power and how power does corrupt, right? If you are in power, especially in single power for a very long time, like Marie is, sometimes that power will come in, corrupt you, and you start, without seeing it, imposing the same structures and hierarchies upon the people around you that you have resisted your entire life. And that's what Marie does in this book, too.
Yeah.
So it is, in some ways it is, she builds this wonderful place. In other ways, she becomes what she doesn't believe that she is, and she doesn't see that she's becoming.
Yeah, no, it's all not all that positive. There's also a lot of controlling and power tripping and manipulation going on.
And arrogance, yeah.
And arrogance, yeah. So do you see, is this like a lingering theme for you that comes out, that's always, I can see...
Arrogance?
No. These that female power and the good things about it and the not so. If you look at Mathilde, like that's the wife in Fates and Furies. She is who turns out to have. If you still want to read it, no spoilers. But she turns out to have a very intense grip on her husband's success and on his family life. And I could see Mathilde mastering that abbey.
Oh, well, yes. But she would have done it she would have stayed prioress, right? So she would have done it behind the doors.
Yeah, behind the doors, yeah.
Yeah, she's just like, I was asked the other night in Utrecht if they were the same character, and I was like, oh no, did I write the same character without knowing it? I don't think so. I think they're different. I don't know. No,
they are very different. But there's a power hunger, which is maybe it's not that female. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think the power hunger is not necessarily something that we can say is any specific gender. No, it's every gender.
Yeah. So what did your mother have to say about this? If your father said that, what did your mom think of this?
My mom?
When your father said, well, if females were in charge, there would be no wars, and it would all be like this happy place.
Well, I think, my mom's of a different generation, right? And so she was like, this is beautiful and very advanced of him, and it was, right?
Yeah.
For
so she was proud of him for saying that.
She was proud of him. She was in the first class of women at her college, right? So in some ways, coming up through the 50s and 60s, she went to college in the 60s, to have any man say the sort of thing that was really important and very beautiful. And it really helped. My sister is a 2-time Olympic athlete, right? Yeah. He raised women who did believe this. So I'm glad, but we can complicate love and gestures of love, right?
Yeah. So you were raised to like this by both your parents, to become like, not maybe a feminist, but to sort of,
I don't think feminist is a dirty word at all. No. And actually, I asked my boys if they're feminists. They're like, duh, of course, right? Like, right? Because feminist just means you think men and women are inherently equal, and we need to make sure that society changes so that is manifested, right?
Yeah, definitely. So where do you think, what does the Matrix tell us where you stand now as a writer?
This is a question for my critics, not for me, I think.
But what do you think? Because, it's quite a bold move, right? To write this, to take this topic. If you would be, if you are not like a big reader and you don't know exactly who you are, you go to the bookstore, you want to buy a present for somebody, you pick up a book and you're like, I don't know, it's about a nun, no. Yeah. Right?
Right. And some people have picked it up and are so mad at me that Keanu Reeves is not in it. Right? Like there's no Keanu. No. There are no blue pills. No
no Keanu Reeves shit.
No. Okay.
So you have to have like a certain standard as a writer to be able to write this, right?
No. not necessarily. Well, I genuinely, when I gave it to my husband, who's my first reader, I'm like, no one's ever going to read this, and you're the last one, and I'm really sorry, right? So actually, I saw this because I started it in the middle of writing this other book. I see it as a sort of triptych, right? A sort of Bruegel, Hieronymus Bosch triptych. Not a trilogy, but a triptych of books that deal with climate change, with the Anthropocene, with sort of God, with women and the status of women. And they're all different, right? They're all stylistically different. They're from different times. They're different characters. They're not connected in any way other than these overarching themes. So the first one, which came out first, is Matrix, about 1,000 years ago. The next one, which will be out, it's called The Vaster Wilds. It's about 1609 and 1610 in Virginia, which then the English came over into Virginia and started up the first permanent settlement in Jamestown. And it was a really fraught time. That winter was called the starving time because I want to say 80% of the people who came over had died out of starvation and disease and cannibalism and all sorts of wild things. So this next book is sort of a female Robinson Crusoe. And it sort of plays with early American captivity narratives, which, like Mary Rowlandson, you don't have to know it, but there are the amazing texts, if you actually read them, that are deeply engaged with the project of expansionism, with the project of imperialism, and so they're written as propaganda. And there are these texts about women who've been captured by the Native Americans. And a lot of times, they're very pious, so they want to get back to the culture that they're from. But some of them are actually the inverse, right? Where they're much happier living with the Native Americans because there's more equality, for instance, right? Like there's a more secure amount of food. So I wanted to look at early American captivity narratives and kind of invert them in an interesting and productive way. And so I came up with this book. And then the third book,
that's interesting.
I'm wrestling with. It's killing me. I might actually die from this book. It's fine. And I've written it so many times, but it's today. It's now. It's called Doom Eager. We'll see if it ever comes out, or if I come out of it. Who knows?
That's exciting. So did you spend any time with nuns in your research?
Yeah, I went. So there's this amazing abbey in Connecticut called Regina Laudis. And it's a Benedictine abbey, it's enclosed. And if you write to the abbess, who is a PhD in literature, you can go and stay with them. They feed you, and you can come in once a day and work with them in the gardens or baking bread or whatever, and go to a few masses. And it was magnificent. And I didn't know what I was looking for by going there, right? I knew, it's different. But the music it felt not archaic, but it felt old in a way that I think, it felt medieval. It probably wasn't, but it felt that way. And I loved working with the nuns in the gardens. It was, November, we were chopping wood. I was the worst at chopping wood, even though I was like among the younger people. And all the nuns were so wildly generous with their time. I would sit down and ask them the most offensive questions. And they answered so kindly and gently. It was really a very beautiful and gentle experience. I love that. Also, and we were talking about this at dinner tonight, but it was the closest I ever came to an idea of death and dying that was beautiful, as opposed to the way that I think, at least in American culture, it's terrified. Where, because all the nuns are aging, right? The younger nuns have been asked to go back to school to become nurses, so that they can come in and sort of care for their sisters into death in such a profound and beautiful way. It's being carried into death by your family. These people that are your actual sisters. You've given up the world in order to be with them. And I think that it moved me so deeply. It was
Yeah.
so wonderful.
Also makes you almost want to be like a nun,
It
right?
really, I have my family to go back to, but if not, I mean, I would have stayed. Yeah.
So do you see a connection between the life of a nun and the life of a writer?
Do you?
I don't know, maybe but when you were, because when I was reading the parts of the daily schedule with all the praying, like which has all these beautiful names, and they sleep for like maybe an hour and a half or something, and then they have to get up again, and it's it's a schedule, and it's the quietness and the structure, and I think structure and stillness are things that most writers thrive on, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, we bonded over the fact that we both get up really early in the morning to go work.
We would be killing those praying hours, right?
Yeah, no, yeah, we would be at the early masses. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's I do think. I mean, I think that it's yes and no, right? Because I do think one needs to be quiet, one needs to be contemplative, but also one needs to be deeply engaged with the world to do
That's true.
anything. And I think structure is very important, but I think writers stop writing well when they stop engaging and stop going to museums and stop listening intensely to the people around them who are strangers.
Yeah.
And stop learning.
Yeah. So in the American literary world and also here now, there's a lot of things going on regarding book canceling, cancel culture, and also about not being allowed to identify with certain people or groups of people as a writer. Like, for instance, I think it's very hard now for a white man to write a novel where the main character is a black woman, or a non-Jewish writer writes a book about a family drama in a Jewish family. So where do you stand on these issues? And does it influence the choices that you make as a writer?
Yeah, I mean, I do have to admit that I was feeling terror to write about Catholicism, which I'm not a Catholic, and to write about lesbian women. I'm not, out lesbian. It's a time of incredible trepidation, for sure. I think it's not helpful for anyone to think that they cannot write a thing, right? I think everyone can write whatever the heck they want to write. There's a difference between writing it and putting it into the world, though. And so the work has to be done to make it so that when you do put a book into the world, you are not actively harming some other people, right? Not in a way that's really obvious, So on one hand, I do think there are good things about sensitivity readers, all this sensitivity around books. I think it shouldn't keep people from doing the work that they want to do.
But I think that it does.
It does, I know. And that's ideal, right? That's me being an idealist, saying that it shouldn't stop anyone from doing anything.
Yeah.
On the other side, there's this whole Bowdlerization of Roald Dahl that happened, right? Like, it was so silly. They took Roald Dahl and they took the words like fat out of him. And what is he, if not just grotesque and mean and awful? Like, that's his whole thing. That's why you read him. So I think, it goes too far in both directions, for sure. I think that writers have to be responsible. And then when things do go into the world, and I learned this through very hard life experience, they just have to go with it, right? I mean, I don't know if you read, there's this, Andrea Longchu wrote this scathing takedown of Hanya Yanagihira in Vulture. And I think, I wouldn't know what I would do if I were Hanya, but maybe I would just keep committing to doing the thing that I do. Because if you own it, I guess nobody can yell at you a lot, right? They can yell at you once for a long time and make you feel bad, but I don't know. I don't know anything. Don't ask me. This is all very complicated.
Yeah, but I can imagine that I can imagine that it does influence your. I mean, I really. You write about the nuns engaging in sexual companionship, and and I had never very naively thought about that actually, and but I mean the religion has a very great power in your country,
Oh yeah.
and so.
But here's the deal, and this is the best thing about nuns and priests.
They're not on Twitter.
Well, some of them are, and they're lovely. But I took this book to my friend, Dr. Katie Bokish. She booked like an entire week at Notre Dame. Notre Dame is this college in the middle of America, and it is the most Catholic place you've ever been in your entire life. And I was terrified because every single thing was with a Jesuit priest or nun or some other kind of priest or like a group of conservative students. But people who spend their lives devoted to thinking about religion have seen everything, right? They've seen every theory. They've been able to take in people's doubts about their religion and deal with it with grace and beauty. And the best readers I had were these people I sat at lunch with and were able to sort of engage in a very deep, thoughtful, theological level about the things that I was suggesting in this book. So I was scared of the priests and the nuns, but they ended up being marvelous readers of a book like this because they're so smart, right? And they've thought very deeply about their faith.
Yeah. And what about all these Catholic people in the country? I'm thinking Amy Coney Barrett kind of.
I'm never gonna please everyone, right?
No.
There are 375 million people in America, and like only 5,000 of them read.
That's true. So you don't have to worry about anything.
I mean, I'm not wrong. Yeah, no, it's not going to be a big deal. And if I do end up hurting people, it will be people who read books like the books that I write.
Yeah. And did you talk about death with the priests and the nuns? Because I found that very intriguing and also, I mean, sort of shocking. But lots of people die in the most horrible ways, right? In which we don't die anymore. They drink a little sip of water which is contaminated, and then all of a sudden they have like black bruises, and and it happens all the time, and it's very normal, right?
Yeah.
So how did it?
No, we didn't talk about that with the priests.
No?
No, I mean, there was a little bit of scurrilous fun that I was having.
Yeah, you could read that,
killing
yeah.
off people. There was this moment that made me laugh, and it still makes me laugh, where the people ate blighted rye, and they got that disease, which I'm not remembering what its name is, ergot, or something like that, where they go crazy, and this is an actual thing. And these were all of the things that people did to try to cure them got progressively worse and worse, like hanging them by the heels and spinning them, and then like digging holes into their skulls and things. These actually were suggested cures for these people, and it was kind of delightful and morbid to write them into my book.
Yeah. Yeah, delightfully morbid. You could see that at a few points in the book, which I thought that you must have had tremendous fun with. Also, is when a young novice comes into the abbess who is very beautiful, and immediately she senses like this girl. She's dangerous. She's coming after my position. She's going to undermine me. She has the wits. She has the brains for it. She's smart.
Charisma.
And then she puts her. She's like, you're going to be in charge of the lepra colony in somewhere.
Right.
That must have been fun, right?
It was very fun. Yeah. Yeah. I have a whole life of abbess afterwards in my head. Like someday I should write a short story about what happens to her after that.
Yeah. There's a story in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is true. I was wondering if, I think we should do maybe some questions from the audience, to give the audience a chance to ask Lauren a question.
Thank you so much. I love your enthusiasm. I've only read Fates and Furies, but I will look for some of your other books. I wanted to come back to the point you were making about writers should not feel that they have to write about what they know, or I'm paraphrasing the way you put it, because it kind of stayed with me and I'm not so sure about that. I'm just thinking of a writer like John Updike, who was a great writer about America, but when he wrote a book about West Africa, it was completely off, and it was like, write about what you know about, what is it? So I'd be curious to hear more about how you feel about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm saying write about what you don't know about, right? I think I'm saying if you feel the urgent need to write something, then get it out of yourself, right? Get it onto the page, but you don't have to publish it, or you don't have to put it into the world, right? And John Updike probably should not have, right? That particular book. Or Philip Roth definitely should not have published The Breast, right? That was a very bad book. But your favorites all have books that probably shouldn't have come out into the world. It's just a different time and a different place, and people get very upset, and they should get upset. I also, I honestly err toward the feeling that cancel culture is like just a lot of people who have not traditionally had pushback are suddenly getting pushback, right? And I think cancel culture is just overblown. It's people yelling at you, that's it, right? That's all it is. Like a lot of people, even Louis C.K., he's headlining stadiums now, right? Like, so nobody's actually canceling you. They can't do that. They can yell at you, and that's fine. And they're doing that because we have Twitter now, because we have social media, because people are more accessible now. But in the age of, say, Charles Dickens, right, the only time anyone was ever going to actually see him was on his lecture tours, and he's talking at people, right? He was lecturing at them, and then when he was done, he would leave the stage, right? And he would never interact with all of his readers. But now you get to talk to your readers, and they get to talk back to you. And so I actually believe cancel culture is not a bad thing. Well, it's not actually real, but it's also being yelled at is not a bad thing. It's just that we have to be more humble, and we have to listen to people who are hurt, and we have to take that into consideration for sure. At the same time, if you want to write a book that's going to be wildly offensive, write it. Go for it, right? Get it out of your system, and then give it to someone who's going to tell you not to publish it.
Oh yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks so much, Lauren. And I just would love to hear a bit more about the research.
Sure.
And where it exists in relation to the narrative. So whether it comes before, during, after, or is it something you throw away?
Yeah. So research, I could probably spend the rest of my life just doing research and be very, very happy, but I've got to send my children to college, which in the US is crazy expensive. So I have to sell my books. So I tend to do a huge amount of research in a certain given amount of time. I'm very, very rigid about that amount of time. And luckily, when I started Matrix, I was at Harvard, and I got 4 Harvard undergraduates who are probably among the smartest humans on the planet to go scour the library for me and bring me back what I needed. So I had help, little elves in the Widener. And so I had stacks and stacks after 6 months. I mean, it was hard to actually go through it. But my philosophy about research is something that I stole from this great writer named Catherine Davis. And she's underloved, but she is so good. Especially, my favorite is The Girl Who Trod on a Loaf, if you're interested in her. But she wrote this book called Versailles. And it's really an embodiment of Versailles. as an almost ghost of itself, right? And the way that she did this, she had so much research. And she went to Versailles just to count the number of steps in the Hall of Mirrors, for instance. Like she did everything, she knew everything. What she did when she finally sat down to write the book was she closed all of her files and she said, if I don't remember the detail in the moment that I need it, then it's not important. And I think that was really beautiful, because what that did is all of the details she fell in love with because they're cool or interesting, but they didn't serve the book, did not end up in the book, right? So the only things that ended up in the book were the things that actually animated the book, that were alive to the page itself. And I love that, and I did that too. And then what happens when you do that, for me, after a draft, I realize the holes of my understanding and education and knowledge, and then I can go do more research to sort of fill in those holes and start over again, right, with what I understood and what I kept. But I actually find limiting research to a specific amount of time keeps you from doing 10 years of research and 0 years of writing. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Oh, not Heath, not my child. Maybe last. I love you.
Hi, thank you so much. We were just wondering, actually, so The Matrix has kind of been claimed as a title, so choosing that again is kind of reclaiming the title, right? So you must have been really drawn to this word. So can you maybe explain a little bit more about this?
Yes, thank you for asking. I also had to fight tooth and nail so that I was actually bloody and crying for the title because of Keanu Reeves. This is the only title this book could possibly have. And it's because matrix means womb, right? It is the mother. It is the source of all the things that come after it. In production, it is the original from which other copies are made, right? In geology, it's the bedrock in which gems are found. Right? In computer science, it's the organizational processes that you can understand the rest of the world. So this title means things in 10 different directions that are so necessary for this book too. But it's also the labyrinth that you find within the book too. So the labyrinth itself, which, I have a very long and involved explanation of it, but I found that is the structure of the book itself, right? That is the way that Marie goes through life is the way that one would go through a labyrinth, right? And so that's the organizational structure, and it's the womb, and it's the center of the planet. And this book could not be anything but matrix. And when they try to change it in other countries, I fight and usually lose. So thank you, Lucy. Thank you, the busy bee.
Thanks. I have a funny question.
Great.
It's a style question. I noticed throughout the book that whenever God was mentioned, it was with a lowercase g. Yeah. And I wondered if that was part of that marginalising of, because of God the Father sort of thing. Or am I just making too much of it? But it really struck me.
Yeah. It was intentional for sure, yeah. So part of it was God, if you don't capitalize it, is no longer a proper noun. And so he's no longer gendered in the way that, the way that one genders. And so the God spreads into other genders, right? Could possibly become feminine as it does in the book. But also, God is not capitalized through all 3 of the trilogy books, or not trilogy, triptych books, because I'm making some large claims about deity and theology and the importance or lack thereof to women, in particular, So it's very intentional, thank you for catching that. And so is not having direct dialogue either, yeah. And so the whole purpose of that is I just didn't want to have to be like, and then she said in English, then she said in medieval French, and then in Latin she wrote. Because I feel like when I was looking at examples of books, I was looking at things like Penelope Fitzgerald's the blue flower, right? Things that are very light on the surface with the history. And I wanted this book to go quickly, and I wanted to not have to bog it down in like intense historical like research, right? And to be like, this is what is, right? So it had to be fast. It had to be indirect. Yeah. Thanks for asking.
But that's also what brings it into the world of the now.
Yes. Well, it's also, yes, yeah. It's in present tense too,
Yeah.
If there are no more, Heath can definitely ask a question. No, go ahead. There are.
I'll go first. Yes? Okay. I had the pleasure of reading your book while teaching O Pioneers by Willa Cather.
Oh, wow.
And it was accidental. My writing group was like, this book has the best sentences, you have to read it right away. So I'm reading Matrix, and then I'm reading Willa Cather, and I can't help but notice that there's a kind of philosophy of a young woman obtains resources that she doesn't really know what to do with, and then over many decades builds a world. And I wondered if you had thought about that in relationship to the title, which, as you just have said too, I also was thinking, that's a title that reminds me of procreation and the womb. And here's this idea that she's going to essentially build something greater than what the queen has without ever once procreating. So I just wanted to... I'm throwing this at you.
Wait, I have to say, this is one of my favorite things ever when someone says something like this. I'm like, oh yeah, I totally see it, right? I didn't know it was there, but I completely see it. This is the beauty of reading books. Every time you read a book, you have another ghost in your head, right? And sometimes they whisper to you at times you don't even know who you're listening to, right? And I'm sure that I have listened to Willa Cather. I love her. I love that book. And I'm sure it happened over the course of writing Matrix. I just can't identify it. What we get to do as readers and writers is glorious, right? It's science fiction. We take other people's ghosts into us, and we are able to use them. I think it's so beautiful. There's nothing more beautiful or communicative in human arts. Well, my personal opinion, other than music. Music's wonderful too. But I think it's incredible. It's incredible. You're never alone if you're a reader, right? You always have these voices in you. I think it's so moving. I'm very moved right now. By you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. All right, Heath. You got it.
Be nice.
Oh, no.
Okay,
What?
so, how and when did you realize that you were don't look. No, don't,
Okay,
don't,
yes,
don't
he's
do
not.
that face. Okay, how and when did you realize that you were an adult fiction writer?
As opposed to...
As opposed to a child nonfiction or child fiction
Oh,
writer?
that I wanted to write adult fiction? Oh, snobbery. So I was actually in college. I was a poet for most of my life, which you guys actually don't know because I've never let you read my poetry. You would have unlimited things to make fun of me about. But I was a poet from the time I was 12 years old, so Heath, your age, and I read Emily Dickinson. And the beautiful thing about Emily Dickinson is she makes you think that it's easy. Because she's fast, she's quick, she dashes things off, right? It seems very easy. It's so not easy. And so I finally, after years and years, got to college and couldn't get into any poetry classes. And couldn't publish any of my poems in the 3 campus newspapers or journals for a school of 1,600 people. And I finally took a fiction class. And it was in this fiction class that I started reading short fiction by living women. Up until then, for some reason, I thought to be an author, you had to be dead and male, right? But because I read very widely. I read very widely, but it was mostly dead people, and that's what they taught me up until that point. And finally, I'm reading people like Alice Munro. I'm reading Laurie Moore. I'm reading Toni Cade Bambara. I'm reading Toni Morrison. Right? I'm reading these great writers, and I'm like, they're all alive, and this is so exciting. Right? I finally have a model for what I can do, and that model is short fiction, which is what I wrote for a very long time before I started writing novels. And I think, I'm sure there are YA or young adult short fiction collections. I've never read one, and I don't know what one would look like. Literary fiction tends to be for adults, and that's what short stories are. And so that's where I trained, and that's where I became proficient eventually over a long period of time. So I think there is no real answer other than I've never thought of writing for anyone else. And when I try to tell you guys stories, you don't like them, so that's not going to happen. I know. Daddy's a much better storyteller, I get it, it's fine.
Well,
there's one more.
Oh, there's one more,
good.
yeah.
Thank you so much. My question is related to the education. Is there any moment you feel as a writer that the stories you put out there, you want to see immersed into the educational system as a feminist changing our view on history and the people that you write about? Do you have discussions with fellow teachers, historians, and the way your stories can help them in educating the world about the great women that were out there that we know nothing of yet?
That would be wonderful. Whenever people do teach my stories, I feel profoundly grateful, right? It feels like the biggest honor anyone could give is to teach one of my stories, one of my novels. And so I basically can't talk when someone tells me this. I just sort of get embarrassed and grateful. I do think, probably my next book, The Vast Wilds, I would love to see taught instead of some of the novels by dead men, right? So it's about the foundation of America, or North America. It's about survivalism, and it's about God, and the way that we meaning white Europeans, imposed our religion upon an entire place, an entire people. So I would love for that to be a corrective, but it won't be. Because I tried to get my 14-year-old to read it, and he said it's too dense and there's too much language. So we'll see, right? But maybe he'll read it now that I publicly shamed him.
Fuss it out a little bit.
I love you, sorry. It's fine, it's fine. He prefers Isaac Asimov, and who doesn't? It's fine.
No more questions?
Okay, yeah.
One more. I think it's the last question. You have some book signing to do.
Yes, I'd love to.
Hi, I have a question about Marie's visions.
I'm sorry?
Her visions.
Yes, yeah, great. Yeah.
Because they reminded me in a weird way of a book called Under the Banner of Heaven.
Okay.
Not sure if you know this. No. It's about two men who were fundamentalist Mormons, who in the 90s had a... Mormonism is very much about personal relationship with God, and they had God telling them to murder their other brother's wife and their baby, which they did. And when you're reading this book, it's very clear that they did this because she was the only woman to ever challenge them, because she was very smart and ambitious. So I was just wondering about the danger in using a religious vision to sort of push through your own human ambition or power.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, so the thing about the visions, this is another point where I just took sheer delight in combing the archives, because the visions are actually from medieval mystics. Almost everything actually occurred in the visions of medieval mystics, which are bonkers. Like, they're completely insane, and they all have their own symbology too, which I had to learn in order to play with them. of course, they were never in all the same place with the same person, right? And so all of the female representations of God, say God as a hen laying the eggs of the earth and of humans, right? That actually came from a mystic. It's so crazy. And the kisses between Mary and Eve, right? That actually came from a medieval mystic. So I gleaned all these things and I actually put them into the text because I tried very hard not to invent almost anything. I did invent some things, and I did take a lot of liberties with apocryphal stories of the time and sort of blew them up into ideas. But I hadn't read Under the Banner of Heaven, but it sounds great. I can't wait to read it at some point. So I do think it's dangerous. It's dangerous to reimagine, right? It's dangerous to rethink, to tell a story in a way that's subversive and rebellious. It's dangerous. And it's particularly dangerous when you could, at the time, you could have died for these thoughts. I mean, there was an abbess at one point who did give a mass, right? And that's such a no-no, right? That is a woman actually behaving like a priest was awful, and she was burnt right. She was killed for that. So it was absolutely heretical and blasphemous to do all these things, to have these ideas and have these visions, and that's why they got burnt up in smoke, because they're terrifying. They terrified everyone. They terrified the one person who read them. Yeah.
It's also interesting that you made the abbess, when she was when she's doing the exercising of the field where the crops don't flourish, that she then afterwards she tells Mary that she doesn't believe in them at all.
Well, she understands performance.
Yeah, exactly.
Like she gets. I mean, that's a lot of how you evoke religious feeling is ceremony and performance.
Yeah.
It's always been that way, right? Yeah.
No, and that also tells us something about the now, right? And about current problems. When she says, rituals creates its own catharsis, Marie. Mystical acts create mystical beliefs. Mm-hmm. And there's a danger in that.
There is, yes, very dangerous.
Also today.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I concur.
Yeah. Exactly. I concur. Well, thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Els. Thank you, Annette and Franka. And thank you, our audience, for being here with us this evening. Without you, there would be no point in doing this. So thank you for joining us. I wanted to mention a couple upcoming events and new things at the John Adams. For example, that we have renewed our website. And you think, okay, everybody does that every now and then. So what? For us, it's a big thing, so I want you to know, and I hope that you'll look at it and enjoy how fresh and hip we are now. Not quite. There are a couple things on the website that I'd like to draw your attention to. Our podcast, of course, Bright Minds, which I think is a huge success, and we're so happy to bring the work that we've done to a new audience with a new medium of the podcast. We also have a blog, and the blog we have right now I think is really special. It's a photographer, Doug Hancock, who has photographed something I did not know existed, First Nation peoples, Native Americans, who have discovered the rodeo as a way of guarding and transmitting their legacy. To me, rodeo was redneck stuff and not Native American stuff. So the way these people have found this American institution of the rodeo and made it their own, I think is fantastic. It's opened my eyes, and the photos are also really beautiful. I was delighted to hear you say, Lauren, that to mention the snobbishness that you think a lot of people feel when they think about historical fiction, because we heard exactly that same thing last September, if I'm not mistaken, from Karen Joy Fowler. She wrote the book Booth, about, well, it's not really about him, but the subject is the assassination of Lincoln by John Wilkes Booth and his family, who was a famous family of actors. She never wanted to write historical fiction, but then she did, and so did you. So apparently there's a lot more to it than a lot of us have ever thought, and we shouldn't be so anxious about the place of fiction in the pantheon of art. I think each book speaks for itself and wins its own followers, such as the people who are here this evening. A couple upcoming events at the John Adams, March 15, Mark Leibovitz, who is a reporter for The Atlantic and has written a book called Thank You for Your Servitude, and it's about what has become of the Republican Party under Trump. It's not about Trump. I think we got away from that, fortunately, for a while, but I think this is very important as we see how the Republican Party is or is not reinventing itself as we move towards the next elections, which scarily enough are coming up very soon. We only have 2 years to go. April 20th, someone I am also really looking forward to, Jill Lepore, Harvard historian. She's been to the John Adams before to talk about her book, These Truths, and she's coming back on April 20th to talk about a book about a strange incident in New York in 1741. The book is called New York Burning. There was a series of unexplained fires in New York, and since they couldn't figure out who did it, of course, the poor whites and the black population of New York were blamed and lynched, and she draws parallels from this period of New York's history into our time. And on June 8th, we're welcoming back Matt Desmond, who was then at Princeton, is now at Yale, where he's the head of the Center for Evictions. He wrote a wonderful book called Evicted, about how many millions of Americans, most of them, of course, poor black single mothers, are evicted from their homes and the devastating effect that that has on their lives and their sense of security. He's written a new book about poverty, and he'll be back with us on June 8th. So sign up for our newsletter, buy the books. Athenaeum, our pals from Athenaeum are with us again. Thank you for being here. The books are for sale, and I wanted to finally close off with a quote from this evening that will stay with me for a long time. We women are as tough and as strange as men. Thank you all. Thank you, Lauren.